The wind of Tarthan 9 blew across the empty desert like a whisper of ghosts. For years, one man had lived here alone, a human named Evan Cole. His small metal house stood between cliffs of red rock and endless dunes. He was an engineer once, working for a colony that no longer existed. When the others left, when the ships stopped coming, Evan stayed. He told himself he liked the silence. He liked the peace, but deep inside, he knew the truth. He stayed because he had nowhere else to go. Every morning, he walked out to check the solar panels. The wind covered his footprints faster than he could make them. He talked to himself sometimes, or to the broken machines that surrounded his base. "Good morning, Unit 9, he would say while tightening bolts. The machine did not answer, but he smiled anyway. He had stopped expecting voices years ago. One night, while the twin moons crossed above the sky, his radar beeped. Evan frowned. No ships were supposed to fly here. No signals ever came. He checked the scanner again. 3 small blips moved slowly through the storm. "Could be a glitch," he muttered, but the signals kept coming closer. He grabbed his old plasma rifle and stepped outside. The air was cold and dry, dust scratching his face like sandpaper. Far in the distance, he saw lights, soft and flickering, like lanterns lost in the wind. By the time they reached his door, Evan's hands were shaking. Through the glass of the airlock, he saw them 3 figures covered in cloaks. Their shapes were human, but not quite. When the door opened, he froze. Standing there were 3 alien women, their skin faintly glowing under the red sky. Each carried a child in her arms. Their faces were tired, their eyes full of fear and hope. "Please," said the one in front, her voice soft but strong. "We need shelter." Evan hesitated. He had not spoken to another living soul in years. He looked at the children, small, quiet, their eyes shining like stars. He nodded slowly. "Come in," he said, opening the door wider. The storm screamed behind them as they entered. Inside, the women looked around, touching the warm metal walls with wonder. The youngest of them, her hair silver like moonlight, whispered, "It's safe here." Evan handed them blankets and water, his hands shaking a little. He could not stop staring at them, at their strange beauty, at the quiet sadness in their eyes. "What happened to you?" he asked finally. The leader, the one with violet skin and golden eyes, looked at him. "We escaped," she said. "From the collective." Evan frowned. "The collective? They're still out there?" She nodded. "They hunt single mothers like us. They take our children for tests." Her voice broke for a moment, and she whispered, "We ran until our ship crashed." Evan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: anger. He hated the thought of anyone hunting mothers and children. He gave them food, repaired the heater, and fixed a small bed out of spare sheets. The women thanked him quietly, speaking to each other in soft alien words. He listened to the sound. It was almost like music. When the children slept, Evan sat outside under the stars. The air was cold but calm now. He looked at the sky and wondered if he had made a mistake by letting them in. But when he heard a baby laugh from inside, he smiled. Maybe the silence he loved so much was never peace, it was loneliness. Days passed, and the women began to help him. They cleaned the workshop, cooked strange blue soup that smelled of rain. Evan showed them how to fix circuits and handle tools. They taught him how to speak a few of their words. He learned that the leader's name was Rila, the silver-haired one was Mira, and the third, quiet and shy, was Tane. Each had lost someone. Each carried pain behind her gentle smile. Evan started to laugh again, something he thought he'd forgotten. The children followed him everywhere, curious about his tools and gadgets. At night, they would sit around a small heater, sharing stories of their worlds. But peace never lasts on a broken planet. One morning, While collecting solar plates from the ridge, Evan noticed something strange. Footprints large, deep, and fresh led toward the camp. They were not his, and not the women's. Someone or something was tracking them. Evan crouched and touched the marks, the sand still warm from a recent step. He felt the air tighten around him, the silence suddenly heavy. He looked up at the sky and saw a faint shimmer, something invisible, but moving fast. His heart raced. "They found them," he whispered. He ran back toward the shelter. Shouting their names, Rila met him at the door. Eyes wide. "What's wrong?" "They're coming," Evan said, breathless. "The collective has found you." The wind roared again over the desert. Carrying the sound of engines far away, the children clung to their mothers. And the lights inside the base flickered. Evan grabbed his rifle and stood by the door. He didn't know what kind of soldiers were coming, but he knew one thing. He wouldn't let them take these women. Not while he was still breathing, and as the first shadow moved across the sand, the man who once wanted to die alone finally had a reason to live again. The morning after the storm was heavy and silent. Evan stood outside his shelter, watching the sky change from red to pale gold. The desert looked peaceful again, but his heart was not. He kept thinking about those footprints he found near the ridge. They were not from any of them, and they were too deep to be from animals. Something had landed on Tarthan 9, and that meant danger. Inside the shelter, Rila and the other two mothers were helping their children eat. The kids laughed softly, unaware of the fear in the adults' eyes. Evan watched them and felt a strange warmth. He had been alone for so long, and now his quiet world was filled with life again. But every sound outside made him reach for his rifle. He wanted to ask Rila more, but she stayed quiet, always watching the horizon. Finally, after breakfast, Evan said, "You need to tell me the truth." He looked at her directly, his voice calm but serious. "What is the collective? And why are they after you?" Rila exchanged glances with Mira and Tane, their faces pale. Then she sighed and sat down near the old generator. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. "The collective is not a nation," she said. "It is a machine made of minds. They search for perfect DNA to build the next generation of their army." Her golden eyes looked into his, filled with grief. "They discovered our people women who could bear strong children with human genes." Evan frowned. "Human genes? But there are no humans left near this sector." Rila nodded slowly. "That is why they hunt the few survivors." Evan felt cold inside. "So your children?" He whispered, "They are half human." Rila didn't answer with words. She just pulled back the collar of the child beside her. His skin shimmered faint blue. But under the light, a faint human tone appeared. Evan stared, his heart sinking and rising at the same time. He had never imagined such a thing was possible. The child smiled up at him. Innocent and curious, Evan forced a smile. Hiding his worry, Myra, the silver-haired one, spoke next, her voice soft as air. "Our ship was shot down. We thought everyone died. We ran for days before your scanners found us." Her hand brushed against the metal wall. "You saved us, human." Evan shook his head. "No. I just opened a door." Rila looked at him seriously. "Sometimes that is all it takes to save a life." That night, Evan couldn't sleep. He walked to the ridge again, holding his rifle and scanning the horizon. The wind was calm, but there was something strange in the air. He looked at the old communication tower, its light flickering weakly. For years, he used it only to listen to static. But now he feared it might be sending signals of its own. He switched it off completely. Then he saw something small, red lights, far away in the dark. Moving slowly, his heart jumped. He knew that glow. It was the color of collective drones. He ran back, slamming the door behind him. Rila was already awake standing by the console, her eyes glowing faintly. "They are here," she whispered. "I can feel their scanners." Evan grabbed his tools and started shutting down the power grid. "If we stay dark, they might pass," he said, breathing hard. Mira covered the children, whispering a soft alien lullaby. The lights dimmed until the shelter looked like a cave. For a while, there was nothing but silence and the sound of slow breathing. Then came the hum, deep and low, like thunder under the sand. Evan looked at the radar 3 signals, circling. "They know we're here," he said quietly. "They're searching for heat traces." Rila moved closer to him. "You helped us, human. Now let us help you." She raised her hands, her skin beginning to glow faint gold. The light spread like gentle fire, touching the walls. Suddenly, the base disappeared from the scanner's cloaked, hidden by her energy. Evan watched in awe. "You can bend light?" Rila nodded weakly. "Only for a short time." Hours passed like years. The hum of the drones faded, then vanished into the night. When morning came, the desert was quiet again. Evan opened the door and stepped out. The cold wind biting his skin, he could still see faint burn marks in the sand where the drones hovered. He knew they would return, and next time they wouldn't come alone. Inside, the women were tired but smiling. The children ran to him, showing him small drawings they made on scraps of paper. He laughed softly, forgetting the fear for a moment. They had drawn him with a metal arm and a big smile. He had no metal arm, but maybe in their eyes. He was already a protector. Rila watched him quietly, her eyes soft. "You remind me of someone," she said. Evan turned. "Who?" "My husband," she whispered. "He was human, too." The room fell silent for a moment. Evan felt something shift in his chest, something he thought was long gone. Hope, maybe, or the start of something deeper. He looked at Rilla and said, "Then maybe that's why I was meant to be here." Outside, the wind picked up again, carrying dust across the barren world. But this time, Tartha 9 didn't feel empty anymore. It felt alive, because now, it wasn't just his planet. It was their refuge. A fragile family on a silent world, waiting for the next storm to come. The days after the drones passed were quiet, but the silence felt dangerous. Evan worked harder than ever, checking every wire, every circuit, and every motion sensor around the camp. He rebuilt the old turrets from spare ship parts and placed them around the ridge. Every time the wind howled, he thought it was an engine. Every shadow made him reach for his rifle. He knew the collective would come back. And next time, they would not stop at scanning. Inside the shelter, life had changed too. The alien mothers helped him with repairs and learned his methods quickly. Rila took charge of the power systems. Mira handled the medical supplies. And Tana cared for the children and cooked. The small room that once felt like a prison now felt like a home. Evan often caught himself smiling, something he hadn't done in years. But behind every smile, there was fear, the kind that comes before a storm. One evening, while he was fixing a panel, one of the children, a boy named Kio, tugged at his sleeve. "Evan," he said, "when will the bad ones come back?" Evan froze, not knowing how to answer. He knelt beside the boy and said softly, "Maybe soon, maybe never, but if they do, I'll stop them." Kio looked up at him wide-eyed. "You're just a human," Evan smiled gently. "Sometimes, that's enough." The boy grinned and ran back to his mother. Evan watched him and felt a strange warmth in his chest, a feeling he had buried long ago. That night, Rila joined him outside by the fire. The desert wind was cold, and the sky shimmered with twin moons. "You should sleep," she said, her voice calm but tired. He shook his head, staring at the stars. "Humans used to think we were the only ones who suffered loneliness." Rila smiled faintly. Now you know better. They sat in silence for a moment. The kind that says more than words. Then the radar beeped, once, then twice. Evan rushed inside and looked at the screen. 3 red dots appeared again. This time much closer than before. He cursed under his breath. They're back. Rilla's face turned pale. We can't keep hiding forever. Evan nodded. Then we fight. He pulled out an old crate from under the floor, filled with weapons and tools he had salvaged years ago. Most of them were broken, but a few still worked. He handed Rilla a blaster and showed Mira and Tana how to use shock rods. They looked nervous, but their eyes were fierce. The children were moved into the underground storage room with enough food and water to last 2 days. Evan sealed the hatch and said, "Stay quiet. No matter what happens." As night fell, the hum of engines filled the air again. Blue light cut across the dark sky as the first drone descended, scanning the ground. Evan crouched behind a metal barricade and aimed his plasma rifle. He waited, heart pounding, breath slow. The drone hovered close, its red eye glowing like fire. Then Evan fired. The blast hit dead center. The machine exploded in a shower of sparks. Mira screamed. More are coming, and she was right. 3 more drones appeared above the ridge. The turrets activated, firing beams into the night. The ground shook as explosions painted the desert red and gold. Rilla fought beside him, her hands glowing with golden energy. She sent waves of light that blinded the machines. Giving Evan time to shoot, Tana was hit by shrapnel, but kept firing. Her face set with silent courage. Evan reloaded, shouting over the noise. "We can't let them reach the shelter," Rilla nodded, her glow flickering. "I'll draw their fire." Before he could stop her, she ran toward the ridge, her light blazing like a beacon. The drones turned to her. Firing plasma bolts into the sand, Evan shouted, "No!" and ran after her, shooting at the attackers. One blast hit close to his leg, throwing him to the ground. He rolled and fired again, taking out another drone. But more were coming, endless and cold. He knew they couldn't hold the line much longer. Mira crawled to him and shouted, "The shield generator, you built one, didn't you?" Evan nodded, coughing. "It's unstable. It could blow the whole base." Rilla's voice came through the smoke. "Then let it." Evan looked at her, her eyes glowing fierce and beautiful in the chaos. She whispered, "If we die, we die free." Evan dragged himself to the console and activated the generator. The ground trembled as blue light surged from the shelter. A dome of energy rose around them, humming with power. The remaining drones hit the barrier and burst into flames. The desert filled with thunder and light. Then everything went silent. Evan fell to his knees, exhausted. Smoke rising from his jacket, the women gathered around him. Breathing hard, for a moment, there was no sound but the crackle of fire. Then Kaiio's small voice echoed from below the hatch. "Is it over?" Evan smiled weakly. For now, Rilla knelt beside him, placing her hand on his shoulder. "You fought for us," she whispered. He looked up at her and said, "No, Rilla, I fought with you." As the dawn rose over Tarthan 9, the broken drones lay scattered like fallen stars. Evan stood among them, his face streaked with dust and sweat. He realized something deep and clear. He had been alone for years, hiding from life. But now, he finally understood sometimes humanity is not about blood or species. It's about standing between danger and the ones who have no one else. He was just a man, but tonight he had been a shield. And for the first time in years, he was proud to be human. The sun rose red over Tarthan 9, painting the desert like blood. Evan barely slept that night. His body ached, and his mind replayed every sound from the battle. He stood at the ridge, looking at the broken drones scattered in the sand. Smoke still drifted from their metal shells, glowing faintly in the dawn light. He thought the fight was over, but deep inside, he knew the collective never gave up that easily. Inside the shelter, Rila treated Tana's wound with a soft blue light from her palms. Myra checked the children, whispering comfort. Keeping their small hands warm, Evan turned off his rifle's safety and began working again. He started building something new, a defense grid powered by the old reactor core. If the collective sent ships next time, he wanted to be ready. "Why do you keep fighting?" Rila asked quietly, watching him tighten bolts with tired hands. Evan didn't look up. "Because I've got something to fight for now." She smiled faintly. "You could still run." He laughed without humor. "Run where?" "I've been running all my life, from people, from pain, from myself." He wiped sweat from his forehead. "Not anymore." By noon, the air began to hum again. Faint and distant, Evan froze, the wrench slipping from his fingers. He ran to the Scanner 6 red signals this time, moving fast from orbit. His heart sank. "They're sending a ship." Rila's face went pale. "If it's a carrier, we can't fight that." Evan stared at the readings. "Thinking fast, the reactor," he muttered. "We can overload it, turn it into a weapon." The plan was suicide. But it was all they had. He needed to lure the enemy close, make them land. Then trigger the overload manually. Mira grabbed his arm. "You'll die." Evan looked at her, calm and steady. "Someone has to stay behind to make sure it works." Rila shook her head. "No, we'll find another way." But the ground began to tremble before they could argue. The ship had arrived, dark and massive, covering the sun like a storm. The desert wind screamed as the collective vessel descended. Its engines burned the sand into glass, and the air filled with electric fire. Drones poured out like metal locusts. Scanning, searching, killing. Evan ran to the generator. Slamming his hand on the control panel, "Go!" he shouted. "Get the children underground." Rila hesitated, then grabbed his face, her eyes glowing with fear and love. "Promise me you'll come back," he smiled. "Only if you promise to live." Then she was gone. Running toward the shelter as plasma fire rained down, Evan ducked behind the barrier. Firing shot after shot, the air shimmered with heat. The ground cracked under the energy bursts. He hit one drone, then another, but there were too many. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the ship's speakers. Mechanical and cold, human life form detected. "Surrender the hybrid subjects." Evan spat into the sand. "Come and take them." He fired again, striking the control wing of a landing pod, sending it crashing into the dunes inside the base. Rila and Mira combined their powers. Golden and silver light spiraled together, creating a barrier of pure energy. Tane shielded the children as debris fell from the ceiling. "Hold the line," Rila shouted. "He's buying us time." The light pulsed brighter. Shaking the walls, outside, Evan crawled to the reactor chamber. Bleeding from a cut on his head, he entered the code, hands trembling, the screen flashing warnings in red. Core overload in T-6 minutes. He stared at the countdown. Heart pounding, he could still escape, he could still run, but he didn't move. The door burst open, and 3 collective soldiers entered. Tall, armored, inhuman, Evan fired his last rounds. Hitting one in the chest, another struck him with a blast that threw him across the room. Pain burned through his body, but he kept crawling. He reached the console, dragging his hand toward the switch. Then, suddenly, the air shimmered Rila appeared in front of him, her face glowing bright. "Evan, stop," she said. Her voice shaking, he coughed. "You shouldn't be here." She knelt beside him, pressing her hand to his chest, light flowing into him. "You gave us hope," she whispered. "Now let us give you strength. Mira and Tana appeared behind her, their light joining hers, the whole room filled with gold and silver fire. The soldiers screamed as the energy burned through their armor. The walls cracked, the reactor screamed with heat. Evan opened his eyes, his wounds were gone, his skin glowing faint blue. He looked at them in shock. "What did you do?" Rila smiled through tears. "We shared our life energy. You're one of us now." The countdown hit 0. Evan grabbed Rila's hand, and in a blinding flash, the world turned white. The explosion tore through the sky. The collective ship above shattered like glass under a storm of light. Flames rose miles high, shaking the ground for minutes. When the light faded, the desert was silent again. The ship was gone, and the wind carried only the soft hum of burning sand. In the distance, Myra's voice broke the silence. Calling his name, Evan stood in the smoke, alive, covered in dust and glowing faintly blue. Rila staggered beside him, weak but breathing. He looked at her and said softly, "Guess I didn't die after all." She smiled, tears shining in her golden eyes. "No, you lived for all of us." As the sun rose again over Tartha 9, the desert was no longer silent. It echoed with laughter, with life, with something new. Evan looked at the small family he had saved, and for the first time in forever, he felt peace. He wasn't a ghost anymore. He was a protector, a father, and a survivor. The storm had passed, but a new dawn had begun. The light of the explosion faded slowly, leaving only smoke and silence over the red sands of Tartha 9. Evan opened his eyes to a world reborn in ash and fire. For a moment he thought he was dead, floating between dream and dust. But when he felt the warmth of a hand gripping his, he knew he was still alive. Rila knelt beside him, her face covered in soot, her golden eyes dim but kind. "You're safe," she whispered, her voice trembling like wind after a storm. Evan tried to stand, but his legs shook, his skin still glowing faint blue beneath the dust. Mira and Tane were nearby, holding the children, their bodies weak but unharmed. The shelter was half destroyed, its metal walls bent and burned. But somehow, the people inside had survived. The desert around them was silent. No ships, no drones, no sign of the collective. Only peace, fragile, real, and alive. Evan looked at his hands, the veins under his skin pulsing with faint light. "What happened to me?" he asked softly. Rila smiled tiredly. "You changed," she said, "when we saved you. A part of us stayed in you. You carry our life now, our strength, our bond." He stared at his reflection in a broken metal plate, the same face, the same eyes, but something new burned inside him. A quiet power that wasn't just human anymore. For days they worked together rebuilding the shelter. Evan repaired the damaged systems, while the mothers cared for the wounded and planted food from alien seeds. The children laughed again, running between the broken panels and singing in 2 languages. Each evening, when the sun sank behind the dunes, they would gather around the fire. Mira told stories of her lost world. Tane sang soft songs of peace, and Rela would watch the stars in silence, her fingers tracing invisible patterns in the air. One night, Evan sat beside her, both looking up at the sky. "Do you think they'll come back?" he asked quietly. Rila shook her head. "The collective doesn't forgive, but they also don't forget. They will remember this place, and the man who stood against them." Evan chuckled softly. "Then let them remember." His voice was calm, but his heart ached with memories of the battle. He still saw the fire, the screams, the light that almost took them all. Rila reached for his hand. "You gave us more than survival," she said. "You gave us hope that even in the darkest world, kindness still exists." Weeks passed, and Tartha 9 began to change, where sand once ruled. Small patches of green began to grow. The alien seeds bloomed under the strange twin suns. The air smelled cleaner, the night softer. Evan built new towers for energy and communication. He sent out a signal, not a distress call, but a message of peace. A single human voice carried across the stars saying, "Here on Tartha 9, life still fights back, months later." A faint reply came, static first, then a voice human. "Tired, but real." Signal received? Survivors inbound. Evan stared at the radio, his heart racing. He hadn't heard another human voice in years. Rila stood beside him, her eyes wide. "You're calling your people." He nodded. "Maybe we can build something bigger now." She smiled softly. "Then we will stand beside you." The day the rescue ship appeared, the sky turned silver with its glow. The children ran outside, laughing, pointing at the light. Evan watched silently, memories flooding through him. He had dreamed of this moment when he first came to Tartha 9. But now he wasn't the same man. He wasn't just human anymore. He was part of something larger. Something born of love, pain, and unity. When the ship landed, humans stepped out, tired explorers in worn suits. They stared at the sight before them, at the hybrid children playing in the sand, at the alien mothers standing beside a human who glowed faintly like starlight. The leader asked, "Who are you?" Evan smiled. "Just a man who stopped waiting for death." He looked at the women and children and found a reason to live instead. The visitors offered to take them off the planet. But Rila shook her head. "This world is our home now," she said. "We will stay and rebuild," Evan agreed. "We'll make it more than a home. We'll make it a refuge." The captain nodded with respect. "Then Tartha 9 will be marked as protected territory." When the ship left, the sky shimmered with its fading trail. Evan felt no sadness, only peace, as night fell again. Rila walked beside him to the ridge. The stars burned brighter than ever, and the air smelled of new life. "You could have left," she said softly. Evan smiled. "And miss all this?" She laughed gently. "You humans are strange." He looked at her, eyes full of quiet warmth. "Maybe that's what makes us human." The children's laughter echoed behind them. The wind danced through the new plants, carrying the scent of growth. Evan closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "I thought I'd die alone." He looked at Rila, at the children, at the small lights of their rebuilt home. "But I was wrong," he said, smiling. "Here on this silent planet, I found a family." The stars above seemed to listen, shimmering softly in the cold night. And for the first time in years, Evan Cole no longer feared tomorrow, because tomorrow finally belonged to them, to the mothers, to the children, and to the last human who refused to give up